Now it must be admitted that if an infinite being is the author of the Bible, he knew all sciences, all facts, and could not have made a mistake. If, then, there are mistakes, misconceptions, false theories, ignorant myths, and blunders in the Bible, it must have been written by finite beings. That is to say, by ignorant and mistaken men. Nothing can be clearer than this. For centuries, the Church insisted that the Bible was absolutely true, that it contained no mistakes, that the story of creation was true, that its astronomy and geology were in accord with the facts, that the scientists who differed with the Old Testament were infidels and atheists. Now this has changed. The educated Christians admit that the writers of the Bible were not inspired as to any science. They now say that God, or Jehovah, did not inspire the writers of his book for the purpose of instructing the world about astronomy, geology, or any science. They now admit that the inspired men who wrote the Old Testament knew nothing about any science, and that they wrote about the earth and stars, the sun and moon, in accordance with the general ignorance of the time. It required many centuries to force the theologians to this admission. Reluctantly, full of malice and hatred, the priests retired from the field, leaving the victory with science. They took another position. They declared that the authors, or rather the writers of the Bible, were inspired in spiritual and moral things, that Jehovah wanted to make known to his children his will and his infinite love for his children, that Jehovah, seeing his people wicked, ignorant, and depraved, wished to make them merciful and just, wise and spiritual, and that the Bible is inspired in its laws, in the religion it teaches, and in its ideas of government. This is the issue now. Is the Bible any nearer right in its ideas of justice, of mercy, of morality, or of religion than in its conception of the sciences? Is it moral? It upholds slavery. It sanctions polygamy. Could a devil have done worse? Is it merciful? In war it raised the black flag. It commanded the destruction, the massacre of all, of the old, infirm, and helpless, of wives and babes. Were its laws inspired? Hundreds of offenses were punished with death. To pick up sticks on Sunday, to murder your father on Monday, were equal crimes. There is in the literature of the world no bloodier code. The law of revenge, of retaliation, was the law of Jehovah. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a limb for a limb. This is savagery, not philosophy. Is it just and reasonable? The Bible is opposed to religious toleration, to religious liberty. Whoever differed with the majority was stoned to death. Investigation was a crime. Husbands were ordered to denounce and assist in killing their unbelieving wives. It is the enemy of art. Thou shalt make no graven image. This was the death of art. Palestine never produced a painter or a sculptor. Is the Bible civilized? It upholds lying, larceny, robbery, murder, the selling of diseased meat to strangers, and even the sacrifice of human beings to Jehovah. Is it philosophical? It teaches that the sins of a people can be transferred to an animal, to a goat. It makes maternity an offense for which a sin offering had to be made. It was wicked to give birth to a boy, and twice as wicked to give birth to a girl. To make hair oil like that used by the priests was an offense punishable with death. The blood of a bird killed over running water was regarded as medicine. Would a civilized God daub his altars with the blood of oxen, lambs, and doves? Would he make all his priests butchers? Would he delight in the smell of burning flesh? Three, the Ten Commandments. Some Christian lawyers, some eminent and stupid judges, have said and still say that the Ten Commandments are the foundation of all law. Nothing could be more absurd. Long before these commandments were given, there were codes of laws in India and Egypt. Laws against murder, perjury, larceny, adultery, and fraud. Such laws are as old as human society, as old as the love of life, as old as industry, as the idea of prosperity, as old as human love. All of the Ten Commandments that are good were old. All that were new art foolish. If Jehovah had been civilized, he would have left out the commandment about keeping the Sabbath, and in its place would have said, "Thou shalt not enslave thy fellow men." He would have omitted the one about swearing, and said, "The man shall have but one wife, and the woman but one husband." He would have left out the one about graven images, and in its stead would have said, "Thou shalt not wage wars of extermination, and thou shalt not unsheathe the sword, except in self-defense." If Jehovah had been civilized, how much grander the Ten Commandments would have been. All that we call progress, the enfranchisement of man, of labor, the substitution of imprisonment for death, of fine for imprisonment, the destruction of polygamy, the establishing of free speech, of the rights of conscience, in short, all that has tended to the development and civilization of man, all the results of investigation, observation, experience, and free thought. All that man has accomplished for the benefit of man since the close of the Dark Ages has been done in spite of the Old Testament.